Hello, welcome to part 3 of my Mage Knight video series. Part 3, of course, is the review. Mage Knight, the board game, retails for $90, and yes, on the surface, I will agree, that seems like a lot of money for a board game. And yeah, it is a lot of money, I agree, but when you look at the fact of everything you're getting in this box, and also you compare how much replay is in this box with all the variants, all the asymmetrical abilities of all the heroes, the fact that no game of Mage Knight is ever going to play the same twice, you realize that $90 for the gameplay in the box is not too horrible at all. But let's look at the components and see just what you're getting for your $90. First of all, the game components, for the most part, are pretty darn decent. The cards themselves may feel like they are a little bit on the thinner side, but I can tell you that even though I was concerned about that when I originally bought my copy of Mage Knight, and I've had this game now, I think, since about January of 2013, if not longer. You can go check my original review. I actually did a written review for this game after I've had it for about 4 or 5 months. So whenever I did that review, subtract a couple months, you'll know exactly how long I've had this game. And the point I'm trying to make is that even though these cards may be on the thinner side, and you definitely notice that when you shuffle them, they have a very, very good linen finish on these cards. So they actually last a heck of a long time. I haven't had any problems. I don't sleeve my cards, at least not for this game. I do have some games I have sleeved, but that's just because such games such as Thunderstone, which I know gets shuffled a heck of a lot. This isn't one of those kind of games, so it's not as much of a problem. But luckily, this linen finish has kept these cards lasting for, we're approaching, I may be able to say I'm approaching having this game for almost 2 years, or at least getting pretty darn close to that point, at least now. On top of that, all these cards have unique full color artwork. Now granted, there are some units that are copies of each other, so you may have two of some units. You may have some spells and abilities, especially between the asymmetrical heroes, that you're going to have some duplicity with, where you're going to have same artwork on both of them. But all things considered, there is a huge variety of full color artwork, and it's not really the horrible cartoony artwork. This is the more adult, more mature artwork, which definitely costs WizKids a little bit of money to get that included in this game. You have it for your unit cards, the advanced unit cards, you have it for all your advanced action cards. You have unique artwork on the day and night board, which looks pretty darn cool. It just adds a little bit onto the game. And not only that, all of these tiles look really darn good. There's some good artwork on them, not some lousy symbols. It feels like a real world when you're building it because it looks that nice on the table. When you connect these tiles to form these lands that you're rampaging through, or depending on how you're playing, trying to be a nice guy and trying to help these people out, well, you're never going to do that because you are a Mage Knight. But as you're building the world, it looks really, really good. The artwork is fantastic. The tiles also are thick cardboard. This isn't cheap, chintzy, thin cardstock. This is actually pretty good cardboard. The score sheets is cardboard, even though it feels a little bit on the thinner side, it's still more than adequate. Day-night board is still thick cardboard. The mana tokens is actually plastic. It comes in multiple colors. They could have just given you cheap wooden cubes or anything like that, but they went one step forward, gave you some nice molds for those, so it looks really good. The heroes all come, if I don't drop them, all the heroes come fully painted. These aren't paint jobs I did. They come fully painted. The cities come fully painted. Everything looks really, really nice in this game. And of course, it's a Vlad Havadal game. So you're going to get a lot of deep strategy, a lot of good replay out of the game. There's good rule books for the game. The game may be pretty deep, and there's a lot to the game, but the game is written really well. They did a good job of giving you two rule books, one to learn the game and one to reference once you know how to play the game. And as a matter of fact, I know some people have complained about this in the past, but I'm going to 100% disagree with them. They complain that you need to hunt through two rule books to play the game when you have to look something up. It's actually not true. The walkthrough book you're going to use once to learn how to play the game. Then after that, you're going to live out of this book, and then you're going to live out of these cards that tell you what the locations do. That's all you need to do to play the game once you've learned how to play the game. The main rule book, these cards, and you're good to go. And not only that, I think I've shown you and emphasized more than enough that this game really is not that complex. Yeah, there's some idiosyncrasies that you have to memorize, but once you learn those, the game is not that tough. I haven't cracked open the rulebook in months. I think the last time I played this game is back in April, and before I did this video, I didn't even read the rulebooks. I just pulled all back out because I remember how to play the game. It just makes that much sense when you play the game. Let's also not forget that the game actually comes with a pretty darn good insert. Now, I know some people complained about this insert in the past, but after playing dozens of Fantasy Flight games, I'll take a not the highest quality insert over the horrible inserts you get with a Fantasy Flight game any day of the week, especially since these can be pulled out. These can be pulled out to make easy access. And if you really, really hate these, you still have this pretty darn decent insert where you put your tiles, put your cards, and however you want to bag or ziplock or however you want to pull out your components, they're all still going to fit there pretty darn easily. So I think it's pretty darn decent. Overall, yeah, $90 may seem like on the high side for a board game, but for the quality of the components, the amount of artwork, and the amount of good stuff in this game, I think $90 is a pretty fair price, especially since you can get this game online pretty darn easily from most of your online retailers for about $60. Fair price, great game, great value. Mage Knight, the board game, list is a game for 1 to 4 players, ages 14 and up, and this is one of those rare times when I totally agree with the age requirement for this game. While the game, simplicity, if you were able to teach somebody the game and able to sit down with them and play with them and help them through it, help them through all the little idiosyncrasies of the game, I think somebody under the age of 14 can definitely play the game. The problem is the advanced strategies this game takes, the amount of difficulty it takes to plan your turns out, the fact that you're going to be planning turns out multiple phases and trying to break everything down. I mean, the game is so complex, it actually has rules in it that allows you to take back your entire turn as long as you have not revealed something that you didn't have prior knowledge for. And what that means is if you haven't revealed a new tile, if you haven't revealed a hidden enemy, or if you haven't done anything that changed the board at all or the gameplay at all, you can take your entire turn back. Even if you went out, attacked a monster, played all your cards, and found out at the very end that you took wounds and you're 1 point short from your attack, the rules say you can take your entire turn back just as long as you saw the enemy before the attack began. So that just shows you how complex the game is. When they put in the rules, you can take back your entire turn. The game also has complex card interaction. There's strategies, there's tactics, there's combinations of cards. You saw me use a couple of card combos when I was showing you the sample gameplay. Yes, there's a lot to this game if you want to get into the really good strategy of the game. Sure, anybody a little bit younger, probably 10 or 11, can play Mage Knight. Yes, I agree with that. But there's no way in heck somebody that young is going to sit around for people to take their long turns. There's no way somebody that young is going to be able to take their own turns quickly. And there's no way somebody that young is going to be able to play this game as efficiently as an adult is. This is definitely a game for 14 up. It's a fantastic game, but it's definitely a game for the younger teenagers and the adults and the families. If you have a family with older teenagers and you're looking for a good family game that you can play cooperatively or competitively, Mage Knight is awesome, but it's definitely not a game for the younger kids. When it comes to playtime, though, this game can be a little bit of a bear, especially for the new players, and that's going to judge how well you're going to like it at the various player counts. First of all, the game is a fantastic solo game. You can just play it by yourself and try to get the best score, or you can play against a dummy player and see if you can beat the dummy player, and they're going to put a lot of pressure on you and force you to start making some difficult choices. You can play the game without the dummy player to learn the game, but if you want to challenge, that dummy player can be a little bit of a challenge and force you to constantly stay on the ball and not optimize as much as you could without that dummy player. 2 players is also really fun, especially if you play a competitive game or a cooperative game, because you can have a heck of a lot of fun going through these scenarios. And this game has a lot of scenarios in it. I know I didn't show that earlier, but there are multiple pages of scenarios. I haven't counted them before, but we are looking at 1, 3, 6, that's a total of 7, 8, 12, a total of 12 scenarios for the entire game. All of them play differently, all of them at different play times, makes a whole bunch of replay value in the box. But once you start adding players beyond the second player, you need to understand that this game is going to get extended in the gameplay. This isn't a game where other players can do much during your turn. Once you've taken your turn, unless you're playing PvP rules and you're starting to attack the other players, there's not much you can do when it's not your turn. Sure, you can do a little bit of planning, but most of your planning is going to be done by the end of your turn, because you're going to drop your hand, look at what your cards say, and you're going to figure out what you want to do on your following turn. And it's probably not going to be messed up too much by the other player's actions. It's quite possible in this game to end your turn, walk off, go make a sandwich, and come back and say, isn't my turn yet? Especially for some of the cooperative scenarios, or if you're playing without the player versus player rules. That's pretty darn possible in this game, especially since players can take 10, 15 minutes just to take one turn. Now, I say this saying that this is for new players. Once you are really good at this game and you know the cards, you know the interaction, and know your hands, the turns go a heck of a lot quicker, and it's possible to get to the point where each player is only taking about 5 minutes per turn. But even taking 5 minutes per turn, you got to realize, even with the blitz scenarios, you're going to imagine that the average player is going to take 4 turns per round. In a 2-player game, you're having 2 players taking 4 turns at about 5 minutes per turn. You're looking at 20 minutes per player, 40 minutes per round. You're having 4 rounds. You do the math. You can see just how long this game can play just with 2 players, just with 3 players, or even with a 4-player game. Some of these advanced scenarios that take 6 rounds with a 4-player game can run pretty long, and they can run extremely long when you're playing the game with new players. I definitely don't recommend this game with 4 players, with brand new players, and I wouldn't play a 4-player game on Mage Knight ever with new players unless I had an entire evening to play. We're talking hours and hours of gameplay with new players. It's not bad. It's not a problem if you're okay with spending that many hours. Just know that you're looking at some really, really long gameplay. It's interesting doing a review of Mage Knight, the board game, as a video review because I just checked. I did my original written review of Mage Knight back in March of 2012. That means this game has been in my collection for over 2.5 years. And my opinion of this game has not diminished, it has only increased. I still think this is one of the best adventure games I have in my collection. I appreciate the deep strategy of this game. I appreciate the deep tactics of this game. I definitely very much appreciate just how much replay is available in this game with the variety of the scenarios, the variety of the maps you can lay out, the variety of cooperative, competitive. Do I want to play the game solo? Do I want to bring over a whole bunch of friends, 4 players? And when we all know how to play the game, it's not that terrible. The gameplay with 4 players, if you have people who know how to play the game, actually it's not that bad to play with. I just want to emphasize earlier how difficult it can be teaching new players this game. And it's definitely not the way I'd ever introduce it to players because you're going to get bored players if you have 4 people who have never played this game before and they're going to be sitting around waiting for the turns while everybody else is going. I don't recommend it that way. But if you have 4 players who know how to play the game and want to sit down and play some Conquest or even play some cooperative gameplay, the game is a lot of fun. Again, my opinion has only increased of this game. This game is fantastic as a solo game. It's one of the best adventure games I own. I am going to repeat that. I already said it. It's one of the best adventure games, but I still say it's one of the best adventure games I own. Now, people have questioned me before when they look at my collection and say, hey, you have other adventure games. Why do you like this game so much as your adventure game? Well, the reason why I like it is I love the card play for the game. I like how the combat is not random. It's predetermined. Yeah, there's a little bit of randomness in the cards you draw, but you are building your deck as you play. You're building your Mage Knight as you play. And this game feels like you are leveling up your Mage Knight how you want them to play based on the units you're picking up, based on the cards you're adding to your hand. You can mold your Mage Knight, watch them level up, and you have more control than you would ever think. On the surface, this game seems so random, but once you learn the deeper strategy of this game, you realize it's not that random. You have a lot more control than you think you do, and it's a very deep strategy game that is a heck of a lot of fun if you're willing to invest the time to become very good at this game. I'm also a huge fan of asymmetrical games, and I love the fact that each one of these Mage Knights plays ever so slightly differently. And I didn't throw this in there, but there are a couple expansions already available for Mage Knight that have more Mage Knights, and they also play differently than the 4 basic Mage Knights. And if you get the Lost Legion, actually add some more gameplay to make the game play just a little bit differently. And I don't want to get in that too much because it's not part of the review, but do know that there is a heck of a lot of really cool asymmetrical balance to this game, but I emphasize the word balance because the game is balanced, even though the characters play slightly differently or a little bit more than slightly differently depending on what powers you pick. And that's another point I want to make. I love how the game never feels like it's playing exactly the same way twice. You can level up your heroes, your Mage Knights, differently by picking different powers. Each one of these heroes has access to 10 powers that they can use, and you're not going to be able to pick all 10 of these powers every time you play the game. Plus, you can get powers from the other Mage Knights if you happen to get their powers. So you can make a different Mage Knight every single time you play the game. And it doesn't even include the units you're going to get, the advanced actions you're going to get, the spells you're going to get. The game just plays differently, but I really love the gameplay. I actually only have a very, very few negatives about Mage Knight, the game. And again, this is a game I've owned for 2.5 years, and I played a heck of a lot out of this game. There's only a few things I can ever say negative, and all but one of them I've already mentioned. I mentioned the gameplay time can be pretty long for new players, and even for people who know how to play the game, it can run a little bit long, especially with a 4-player game. 4 players who know the game very well can probably get the game down in about 2 to 2.5 hours, depending on just how well you're playing and how methodical, and if you're playing a cooperative versus a competitive game. Competitive games are going to go a little bit quicker. Cooperative games can go a little bit slower because you're going to have a lot more table talk, and you can kind of work together so you don't end the rounds too soon. So it can take a little bit longer with the cooperative play. There is one thing I haven't mentioned though, and it can be the luck of the initial draw. Every time you play this game, you are going to build a map, and there's going to be a little bit of luck depending on how you're going to build your map, and that luck is also going to be based on exactly what kind of hand you get early in the game. So if your first initial draw happens to be really advantageous to you and happens to be advantageous to the map that has been built, and on top of that you happen to get the right tactic card, or you just happen to choose the lowest tactic card and happen to go first, you can have one heck of an advantage over the other players, especially if you got a really good draw and your opponents didn't get the most optimal card draw that they could get to start their game. Now you can mitigate this some by changing the shape of your map. You can also mitigate this some by using some of the rules variants which allow you to modify your Mage Knight before you even start playing the game through a draft using the advanced actions. And that's probably something I do recommend as players once they start getting more advanced with the game, is I recommend using the advanced draft and using different map layouts based on the amount of players, so players don't get quite as hosed by a very bad draw compared to another player who got a very excellent draw. What I usually recommend is take the wedge for 2 players, and if you start adding more players, start widening your map formation. That way you don't have one person who gets an early start, takes all the good early resources from the other players, and everybody's left trying to grab the crumbs. To be honest though, this isn't a very often occurrence. It's a very rare occurrence, but in all the times I have played it, I have seen it creep up once in a great while, so it's definitely something I wanted to mention. Also, the cards do feel a little bit on the thinner side, but luckily that laminate has kept these cards surviving through the years, literally through the years. They don't seem dog-eared, they're not torn up too badly. So I know originally when I did the review 2.5 years ago, I said that I thought the cards were a little bit too thin. I didn't know how they were going to last. Well, 2.5 years later, I can definitely tell you they have lasted. They're not getting dog-eared. They're not starting to get frayed on the ends. They're not starting to get marked. Cards are still looking pretty much unique on the back, or similar on the back, so I haven't had any of the cards marked yet. Haven't had any of the problems there at all. The bottom line here is if you're looking for a fantastic adventure game with lots of strategy, asymmetrical gameplay, tons and tons of replay, it's never going to play the same way twice, lots of fantastic variants built into the game, multiple scenarios, really good components for the most part. There's some little things, but everything I mentioned, probably not a big deal. It's just things I want to mention just so you notice it, because the game can seem a little bit pricier at the $90 price mark. If this game was retailed about $65, I probably wouldn't mention anything about the components, because at that price, the game just cannot be beat. Mage Knight is a fantastic game. It's probably could be my favorite Vlaada Chvátil game next to Dungeon Lords. If I had to pick between the two, I don't know which one I could pick, but I can definitely say Mage Knight would be my Desert Island game between the two if I had to pick one. Mage Knight, fantastic game. This has been another off-the-shelf board game review looking at Mage Knight by Vlaada Chvátil. Thank you for watching.